And I think the thing that's concerning is not just that you have someone who can do it, but that you're someone who's doing it at the behest of a tyrannical authoritarian president. It's another indicator of the demise of our democracy.
Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. Our thanks to Micah West for joining us from the SPLC and spending some time. I really appreciate him and the work that the SPLC does and the support we get from them. Also, thanks to our friends over at Wind Creek Entertainment for their continued support. We really do appreciate them and all they do as well. And for everybody else, that listens, that supports, that just everything. We really do appreciate y'all, and it's fun to do this every week and to kind of get on and vent and talk and spread some information around. And we hear from people a lot of times about what we talk about and they say we got it. It's a great thing because we can listen to it anytime. Don's is about to be grass cutting season again, so Don can get back out there and listen. My boy Javi over in the neighborhood here. I really appreciate them listening and continuing on. And it just you can listen anytime, and I think it's a nice break for people from some of the other nonsense that they hear. It's a fun show. It's a fun show most of the time. Yeah. The last part here, the bonehead part this week is going to be a bit of self-indulgence for David and I, and it's because the bonehead is Jeff Bezos, and it's about the utter destruction of the Washington Post, and what's happened there. We're two old newspaper guys, I got into newspapers. I got into newspaper writing, into sports writing. Originally, because of the Washington Post. It was because of Woodward and Bernstein. It was because of Tony Kornheiser. It was because of Michael Wilbon. Those people literally drove me to do this. I've said this before. Tony Kornheiser showed me a pathway in life that was unlike anything that I had imagined that I could do. When I read him doing sports. I saw him on TV and radio. I saw him doing a lifestyle column in which he talked about his dog eating his money, and stuff. It opened this idea for me of, hey, I can do a bunch of different things and not be tied down to one thing. And I can tell people opinions, and some will hate me, some will love me. It'll be a great time. And mostly it has been. It has been a fantastic time. But the Washington Post has meant a lot to a lot of people for a long time. And what they did last week, week before last, whenever it was, the utter destruction happened, in essentially eliminating the entire sports department there. It is just, it was like, it's like I don't even know how to describe it. It's worse than a familiar TV show going away or something. It's like this thing that you relied on for so long no longer being there. And it's not just the fact that they laid off so many people. It's not just that. It's that they've also so changed the coverage tactics. They've so toyed with, we've had the whole problems with, the editorial cartoonist who resigned because they wouldn't run the cartoon that she drew. There've been problems with the editorial board, people resigning because of some issues that have taken place. It just, Sally Jenkins is one of my favorites from there as well. Now she's with the Atlantic, and she has written some columns about and explained, kind of what's happened over the course of the last couple of years. It's terrible. I mean, it's just the destruction of something that we need. And I don't think the average person realizes how much you need it right now.
And I'm going to say, because I actually became friends with several African-American columnists there at the Post, people who that or who had just done good work there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a slap in the face, I think, in particular to that tradition, the tradition of black columnists there, that had been developed over time, that was relevant not just because they were black, but because of the city they were serving, and
Yeah.
also just because of the skill level that they brought. I'm talking about people like Kevin Merida, who went on to who left the Post to do great things with the Disney company, and
Mm-hmm.
then went on to actually be the editor of the Los Angeles Times before it began to fall apart,
Right.
which is a whole nother story.
Yes,
His
it is.
wife, Donna Britt, brilliant columnist. These are friends of mine,
Mm-hmm.
people that I got to know fairly well and hang out with and learn from. Joe Davidson is another one. Richard Prince, another one. I met the great Colbert King, who's another brilliant columnist there. And there was at least one other person whose name is slipping me right now, but that I got to know, who were brilliant African American columnists. That whole legacy, that whole lineage has just been blown up. And
Yeah.
it's disgusting for a lot of different reasons. And like you, even though radio was my first love,
Mm-hmm.
newspaper work, especially newspaper, pardon me, column writing, became like my second love. And to see that whole thing just destroyed by Bezos when it didn't have to be. I
Right.
mean, it just, this total shift away from independent-minded people. I don't care if they were conservative or liberal,
Mm-hmm.
but just independent-minded people, because you also had people there who were conservative.
Yeah.
Like George Will. He was
Yeah.
conservative.
Yes.
They blew up everything. They blew
Mm-hmm.
up everything. And again, it's not about ideological bent as much as it is about independence of
Yes.
thought, and
Yeah.
an informed people who were not just independent in their thinking, but who were informed because of their experiences as journalists for years. I didn't agree with most of what George Will wrote, but I
Mhm.
couldn't dispute the fact that he had an informed, independent way of thinking, whether
Yeah.
I agreed with it or not. So
Yeah.
whether we're talking about, Will or some of my friends, it's a horrible thing that's happened.
Yeah, it is. And it's just, it's one of those things, I think, sometimes that you don't, the average person, I don't think recognizes the impact that a solid local newspaper has on a community, and on your informed life, as that
Mhm.
person. People talk a lot today about like corruption, and and they're often surprised by things that are happening. I'll give a perfect example. Folks in Montgomery are surprised to learn that the police department is understaffed, and they just can't understand why this is happening, and what's going on. Well, you don't have a really a functioning paper there anymore. I mean, there's a paper there called the Montgomery Advertiser still, but there's like three
Right.
people working at the thing, and I mean, so you
Mhm.
don't have somebody who goes and sits at outside the police station, or goes to the places where cops congregate and talks to them. You don't have that this person who goes to the city council meetings and knows the city councilman as well as anybody, and calls them on their phones and talks to them about things that are happening, and talks to the mayor and covers the mayor. And you don't have these people there in town anymore that gives you this information. And that's a vital piece that used to be present for most people. That's why your parents and your grandparents and stuff, they didn't deal with some of the things that are happening right now, because there was this person that was there, that was, or these people who were there that were informing them of what was taking place in their town every day. And they sat down at breakfast or at dinner, whatever time the newspaper came out, and they read their paper and they read those stories about what was going on at City Hall, what was happening at the city council meeting, what happened at the county commission meeting, what scandals were taking place, who was taking a bribe, who was getting the contracts, what happened with the shooting, and it just, David Simon went before Congress several years ago. He's the guy that wrote The Wire. He also wrote Homicide, Life on the Street, and some other things as well. But The Wire is what he's best known for. And he's an old newspaper guy. He's a cops beat guy. And he talked about the value of that person, that person on your community, and on keeping the cops in line, on explaining it.
And what people don't really realize, because they're, people who are not in the business, Josh, is that, yes, you got TV news stations, but the TV but the newsroom in a TV station and the approach to coverage is completely different.
Yes.
It's just different.
Yeah,
and
it's not
I
in
know
depth.
it because I've been around that, and I'm not trying to denigrate it, but I'm just saying it's different. Right. Newspapers were the form of media in our cities that did the kind of hard, street level, boots on the ground reporting that you're talking about. TV reporters don't tend to do that unless you're talking about the big cities where they have huge budgets. Chicago, New York, LA. Yes, that you'll get that. Washington, D.C. You'll get that in those cities, but in small town America, you don't get that from TV stations. I'm sorry, you just don't.
No, and it just is. And look, it's you're right. We're not denigrating it because it's different. It's a different form of news. It's a quick. They've got 15 to 30 seconds a lot of times on some stories, to relay what's happened. And it just is not a lot of time. Where in a newspaper story, you would have, certain column inches that you would have to fill, and you could get in depth, and you could go behind the scenes, and you could talk to these people, and you could have those relationships with people, not professional relationships, these professional relationships that you fostered all the time, and you built up. And
that's right.
Yeah. And you just had these things that these contacts that you knew, when something happened with the police department, you knew what was going on. It's just, honestly, I attribute a lot of that to what's happened with a lot of police departments and why they've gone crazy in some places, because there's no public oversight anymore. There's no person there explaining what's going on.
No public oversight and no institutional memory.
That's right. Yes.
And you need both. You need both.
Yeah.
You need both in police departments, and you need them in the newsrooms of America.
Oh, hey, I'll give you a perfect example of that. Just a few months back, there was this whole story in the Montgomery media about how they're going to go back to trying to fund the middle school sports programs in Montgomery. And the city wanted to put, to invest some money into this. The city council was going to do it. And they were talking about what a great idea this would be. And they wrote these stories, and nobody mentioned that it was just some 15 years ago that the city covered all of the middle school sports, and then they decided to cut them. And it has been a catastrophe in terms of keeping kids in line and keeping a lot of kids that have strayed and are now in our criminal justice system. That's been one of the problems. And you needed somebody there to say, hey, a bunch of those coaches y'all fired back in 2005 could have told you this was going to happen, and we're screaming it from the rooftops at that point. But that's the sort of thing. And let me tell you, there's not
institutional memory.
There's not a lot of times when those people who were covering the cops, the courts, the city council beat, they didn't necessarily have an adversarial relationship with people. A lot of times those cops respected them and the work that they did because it allowed them an outlet to say, listen, we've got this crazy dude that's been doing X, Y, and Z. And, you know, somebody ought to pull his file and see what's going on. Because let me tell you, real cops hate the crazy cops. All right. Probably as much or more than you and I. All right. They hate them. They hate having to deal with them. They hate having to try to cover their stuff. They hate having to bail them out constantly. They hate the look that they give the department, all of it. And so you're missing that as well. You're missing some of that oversight. It just, but the whole thing, it, you know, I could launch into a whole other thing about how, you know, we've got to put in a wealth tax and stop some of this, because when you can buy an institution like the Washington Post and destroy it, somebody's got too much money. Okay. That's just all there is to it. When you can do that and destroy it and just on a whim. I think the thing that's concerning is not just that you have someone who can do it, but that you're someone who's doing it at the behest of a tyrannical authoritarian president. Yeah. You know, it's another indicator of the demise of our democracy. And with that, we're going to leave you. Until next week, y'all be safe out there.
Smile on your face. Peace.